Gemara in Shabbos quotes a very famous midrash that says, "Tzvi tachti tahal." The Klal Yisrael at Har Sinai camped underneath the mountain. So the midrash says, "Kafara aleim har gigigit." Literally, underneath the mountain, Hashem took the mountain, He held it over Klal Yisrael's heads, and said, "If you accept the Torah, great. If not, the mountain would come down, and that would be the end of Klal Yisrael." So Gemara said, "That's true. We were forced to keep the Torah. Mikan moda rabel oraita." It's a pretext to challenge the very bindingness of Torah. If we were forced to keep the Torah, maybe Torah is not fully binding. So the Gemara carries and says, don't worry. Many, many years later, in the story of the Megillah, it says, Kimu v'kiblo Yehudim, that even though there was a claim to say the Torah wasn't binding, at the time of the Megillah, Klal Yisrael finally accepted the Torah and it became binding. At first glance, the Gemara seems scandalous. What, for hundreds of years, Torah wasn't binding? And what is only binding today because of what the Jews in Shushan took upon themselves. So the Meshech Chochmah explains a little bit more about this Gemara, but it also makes it very difficult. The Meshech Chochmah says, what do you mean they were forced to keep the Torah? So he says, well, the revelation of Har Sinai was so overpowering. The miracles they'd seen in Egypt, the miracles they'd seen leaving Egypt, the splitting of the sea was so amazing that it was so obvious to them that they had to keep the Torah that they lost their free will. It was so obviously true that they accepted the Torah upon themselves that they didn't really use their free will. They just went into and accepted the authority of Torah. But the Meshech Chochmah itself is difficult. But if I buy a car and it's absolutely obvious to me that this is the best car I'm ever going to buy, everything's perfect, there's nothing wrong, well, I can come later and say, I didn't have free will because it was so obvious for me that it was correct. How did the fact that it was so obvious for us that the Torah was correct make it as if it was forced upon us and therefore question its bindingness? So the Ramban adds another point on the Gemara there in Shabbos. And the Ramban says the Torah was binding for hundreds and hundreds of years. At what point was the question first raised about the bindingness of Torah? Only at Chorban Bayit Rishon. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, we went into Galut, we suddenly turned around and said, one second, did we really accept the Torah upon ourselves even for this context? Yechezkel Navi said, maybe there's been a divorce, maybe Hashem divorced Klal Yisrael, maybe the master's freed his slave. Now we turned around and said, it's true, we accepted the Torah upon ourselves, but we accepted the Torah upon ourselves when we felt there was a relationship with Hashem, when we could see the hand of Hashem guiding us. But now we're going into Galut, and we can no longer see Hashem's presence. It's a time of Hester Panim. So maybe the Torah is no longer binding. And for almost 70 years, that question remained. Could there be Torah? Could there be a relationship when you can't see Hashem's presence in the world? And then came the story of the Megillah. There are two different ways to read the Megillah. And certainly two different ways if they were living through the story of the Megillah. The question, the big question of the whole Megillah is, where is God in the Megillah? His name doesn't appear. And you could easily read through the whole of the Megillah. You could live through the story of the Megillah and say, okay, it was one coincidence after another coincidence after another coincidence, a string of coincidences, and somehow we managed to be saved. And if you don't see the hand of God in history, maybe that's how you'd read the Megillah and live through the Megillah. But the Jews of Shushan didn't see it like that. After one coincidence after another, after everything was turned on its head, they suddenly saw the pattern. And they realized this is one coincidence too far, and they were enlightened to realize that even in a time when God's hidden, and He doesn't show His face, and there's no open revelation, really God's hand is running the show. And suddenly when they tuned their sensitivity to be able to see Hashem's looking after us, even when it's not clear, they realized that no, that original acceptance of Torah, Har Sinai, did apply to all times, even the time of Hester Panim. And there was Kimu v'Kiblu, they were Mekayim, the original Kabbalah that they accepted at Har Sinai. And this is how we read the Megillah every year. It's obvious to us when we read the Megillah that it's the Yad Hashem running every single thing. Finish off with maybe one little vort, maybe it's a Purim vort, I don't know. We sing about Charvona. Zachor Latov. Why do we say Zachor Latov? Because the Midrash says Charvona. What did he do at the end of the day? He just pointed out the gallows, and then they took Haman and hanged him. But we say Zachor Latov because the Midrash says that was Eliyahu Navi. It's another way of saying Charvono was being, puppeted by Hashem. He was also part of Yad Hashem, guiding the events. And this may be just Purim Torah, but maybe it's really true. Before we say V'gam Charvono Zachor L'Tov, we say V'gam, 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 V'gam. What's V'gam, 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 V'gam? Every key event in the Megillah is introduced by the word V'gam. Gam Vashti, Gam this, Gam that. The whole point of the Megillah is when you have V'gam, 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 this coincidence, and this coincidence, and this one, and this one, and this one. That's how you see Yad Hashem. When we see that, we realize Hashem's always looking after us, even in time of Esther Panim. Purim Sameach.